Hello, 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 and welcome to the Sober Butterfly Podcast, your favorite resource for sober inspo, sober fun, and sober travel. Episode 116 of the Sober Butterfly Podcast is going to be a solo episode with just moi, your host, Nadine. What really sparked the inspiration for this week's episode was something that I saw on social media. So this past week, in preparation for Halloween, there's been a new trending meme that really piqued my interest. So this meme is basically a spirit Halloween costume bag, repurposed with hilarious tropes that depict very specific subcultures. I was immediately drawn to this trend because, one, I found it to be funny as hell. Like most humor, I find that it's funny because it's actually true in many respects. Two, I also loved it because I recently read an article published on Medium a couple years ago, like December 2020, and it's called Little Sobriety, Big Reach, The Dangers of Newly Sober Influencers. I just want to take a moment to read a direct quote taken from the article that inspired this. I actually found the author, it's Rebecca Rush, and she wrote this December 8th, 2020. So I will link this in the show notes in case you want to read the article for yourself. It's on workithealth.com. I initially read it on Medium. But yes, you can read this directly without having a subscription to Medium. But anyway, something that stood out for me is she says, in my experience, sober influencers make the brutal reality of recovery look like an easy, optional process of self-improvement. Any deep or not Instagram-friendly issues are entirely hidden. They make it seem like if you don't fit into the influencer box or don't have problems fixed with yoga and a smoothie, you are irreparable. That joy and freedom are reserved for skinny women in yoga pants who can treat their substance abuse with bullet journaling and mocktails. If you have reach in aesthetics, you can put yourself in a position of authority because people will listen to you. Recovery and sobriety can be sexy, but marketing that as the work and reward bypass a lot of what it is about. Recovering the lost and broken parts of yourself in order to live a fulfilling life. The idea of a sober influencer curating a digestible, easy breezy fix for the deep-seated issues that make recovery a necessity is a shallow dive into a deep pool. This is actually a subquote taken from Lauren M., who created the meme account at Brutal Recovery. This article really had a lasting impact on me. So I'm going to talk about that a little later. But anyway, okay, so back to the meme. So this meme goes viral and it's really funny. Like I've seen a bunch of good ones. I may inject a few of them here so you can look for yourself. But basically it's just like an empty spirit Halloween bag. And so like I mentioned before, content creators were able to repurpose it to depict a subculture. So my meme went a little something like this. So the theme or the costume that the bag had was for a sober influencer. And so I had a picture of myself in a very sober influencer or just social influencer way, like kind of peering to the side because my beauty is too much to be dead on to the camera. That's the look I was going for. And I have a Topo Chico sparkling water in my hands because, well, that's on brand, sparkling water, so we're duh. And it was really funny because on one side of the bag, you can list the contents of the costume. So for my costume, I said included inspirational quotes, clear skin, 1+ month of sobriety, repurposed memes, sparkling water obsession, paid membership community, and then not included, because, costumes will be like not included, I don't know, a cigarette lighter, but not included was a ring light, dramatic weight loss, transformation, and a book deal. And I got quite a few likes on this post and a lot of discourse happened. Like people were commenting different things because I connected it back to that article that I referenced about people trying on sobriety and the inherent dangers connected to sobriety being trendy. So that got me thinking. I was like, is sobriety trendy? Am I presenting too much curated content that is glossing over the extremely difficult parts of sobriety? And if so, is that problematic? And I'm wondering if it's problematic for those who are viewing sobriety as a matter of life or death. So I asked people the same question on my post. So I had the meme, and then below that, I went really into detail about like the idea of mainstream sobriety and as a sober influencer, do I have an ethical responsibility to my followers or to the general public? To address this topic of sobriety being trendy, is sobriety the new black type of thing? I want to just focus on my platform. I don't want to name specific sober accounts that I follow or that you may or may not have heard of. I don't want to speak in really like vague general terms. I want to just sort of look through the lens of my sober account, the Sober Butterfly on Instagram, and show how it has metamorphosized. I don't know if that's a word, but it has changed over the course of me starting the Sober Instagram page back in August 2021. And so the remaining parts of this episode will be broken into phases to show how the social media page has transformed, as I mentioned, from the beginning, the inception, looking back a year and a half ago almost, to present day. Let us begin. Phase 1. I started the Sober Butterfly as a personal blog. I'm talking about my social media page here. So I was about a month sober, and I went on this like epic vacation to 4 different countries and really wanted a place to document my sober travels and also to hold myself accountable. That's it. Okay. I was not in a position to help others with their sobriety, and I wasn't looking to do so, if I'm being completely honest. I was solely focused on me. And in starting the page, I intentionally put my soberversary, which is July 5th, 2021. And I think in doing so, I was trying to, as mentioned before, keep myself honest, something that I struggled with in my drinking days. But I also wanted a visual reminder or like a visual cue with each passing day. I'm furthering my sobriety. And also knowing that if I mess up, it's fine. I'm just going to reset the clock. Without realizing at that time, I now realize or recognize another benefit to me having my sobriety date front and center in the bio of my page. It was clearly showing people that I was in the wee stages of my sobriety, which I hope translated into, hey, I am not an expert here. Don't really know what I'm doing. So today, actually, I went and I did a deep dive into the earliest post that I had. And I was just seeing it as basically me celebrating personal milestones. And I had all these like lengthy captions that may or may not have been TMI or too much information. But I really stuck to my mission of being honest. I posted a lot of pretty pictures of me, some of which were not recent, but from before times, like drinking times in the pandemic especially. And as I evaluate my page with a deeper understanding of self with more sober time and, looking through the lens of making sobriety trendy, I do see an issue with me posting these very like curated pretty pictures, especially when it was during times of me drinking. So number one, the first issue I see with this is that there were times that I was clearly more focused or concerned about looking the part. And so what I mean by looking the part is I wanted sobriety to be the best thing that had ever happened to me. And I wanted to showcase that. And in truth, it really has been from day one the best thing that ever happened to me. But it was also the hardest thing that I've ever had to deal with. I don't think I was necessarily getting into the nitty gritty or the really like painful parts of early sobriety, if I'm being honest. Like I did share a lot. And I think in writing, if you actually took the time to read my captions, you could see that. But just if you were doing a quick gloss over my page, you would probably not gather that. So that's just something that I'm noticing that could be problematic. And then 2 was that I didn't talk about my weight gain that I experienced in the first few months of my sobriety. And keep in mind that weight gain for me didn't quite fit the theme that I was going for, which was like, sobriety is amazing, everything is great. Now I realize why I didn't showcase that. I think for one, it was extremely triggering for me. And once again, I wanted to focus on the positive aspects of sobriety. I wish I would have talked more about that, more about the sugar cravings and how gaining weight was actually a huge trigger for me and led me to kind of regress back to like disordered eating and over exercising. And I wish I had shared that because I think that would have been helpful for people in the early stages like me. And maybe I could have helped someone through that. I mean, I have shared about it on this platform using the podcast in depth and more recently on my page, but like was not something that I felt comfortable at the time tackling. So I'm going to give myself grace there. I wasn't there yet. But remember, I said it earlier, I wasn't necessarily posting to help people in the beginning stages. It was just a personal visual journal. But the strangest thing happened in the process of me starting the personal blog. I ended up helping people, which brings us to phase 2 of the Sober Butterfly. Okay, stage 2 of TSB. I'm going to use TSB as an acronym because I feel like saying the Sober Butterfly over and over again is a lot. So TSB, phase 2, was all about community. About, I would say, 5 months into the page, I started gaining a little bit more traction, more followers. And I remember I actually met with a friend who'd been watching my sober journey. Now, he himself was not sober, but like, I guess a little sober curious. I remember he encouraged me to do more with TSB. And I remember distinctly one day we were sitting on the beach, and this is in South Florida. And I remember furiously taking copious notes because this man was like breaking it down, like giving me all of the nitty gritty logistics as to how I could transition TSB from being a sober personal blog to being a paid membership community. That's what we had kind of like landed on. And he himself had had tons of experience with this sort of thing. So when he was sharing this knowledge with me, I thought, yes, okay, like he was so compelling. This made so much sense. And, you know, like as mentioned before, more people were reaching out, more followers were coming, people were asking me questions. And at this point in time, I barely had 6 months of sobriety under my belt. I don't even think I had 6 months yet. It was like 5 months and change. I was like running with this idea of starting the paid membership community. But the problem was I didn't actually believe I was capable of having a paid membership community. So I know what you're thinking. You may be thinking, okay, Nadine, it's a touch of imposter syndrome rearing its ugly head. Maybe, but no. Because here's the thing about recovery, and this is connecting to the article I read. It's a very niche subculture where people's lives are literally at stake. But if I were like a beauty influencer and I'm just out here sharing like beauty products and reviews and I messed up somehow, like I gave misinformation or whatever, the worst thing that could possibly happen was what? Somebody wasted $30 on a lipstick in the wrong shade, or like a breakout happens on your face. I don't know. But the thing about if I mess up or misshare information or bring someone on into the paid membership community that has positioned themselves as an expert in sobriety and then they share something wrong, there is a chance someone could relapse, which has clearly more lasting implications on their general health and well-being. So I just didn't feel like I was equipped to handle bringing people together from different networks, different phases of their sobriety, and positioning myself as like the liaison or the leader of a paid membership group. I also just didn't like the idea of anyone paying me a single dime for information that I had obtained through my sobriety, through my experiences, through meetings, through just simply connecting with people, all for the free 99. Like I gathered all of this information on my own for free and with the help of others. So I didn't feel comfortable, having people pay me for that. But something good did come out of this experience because I realized the importance of community and inclusion within said community. So the inclusion piece consisted of me highlighting Black women and people of color in sobriety. And it kind of made me reflect back to when I was sober curious. So this is before I even started the Sober Butterfly podcast or the Sober Butterfly page. I was just sort of like entertaining the idea of what life could be like without alcohol. And so when I was looking at different sober influencers or different sober accounts, I realized that the thing I was looking for didn't quite exist for me. Newsflash, I'm a Black woman, especially if you're watching this on YouTube. I'm Black and I'm a woman. And so I'm always going to look for things that depict me, even in recovery. And so when I was searching on sober Instagram, looking at other influencers, I just didn't see me. And so I made it a priority to start featuring sober women of color on my page through Sober Spotlights, and I did like a Soberversary post. In fact, on this very platform, the Sober Butterfly podcast, I've had a few of my guests like Christina and Nicole over at the Sober BFF. They were both Sober Spotlights that I featured on my page, and then it grew from there. And like I invited them onto the show, which actually reminds me, I haven't done one in a while. So if you'd like to be featured as a Sober Spotlight, you just have to be a woman. You do not have to be Black or a person of color. But if you'd like to be featured, go ahead and DM me. I'd happily do so. I basically abandoned ship with the whole paid membership community idea. Also, I'd never done a paid membership community. I've mentioned before, I go to AA meetings online and in person, and both of those things are completely free. I have social media and I connect with other sober women who, the platform thankfully is free. So I just had no experience dealing with like other paid memberships, sober experiences or communities. So like, why would I ever start one? Like, it just didn't make sense for me. So I didn't do it. Let's enter stage 3, which is how you see the Sober Butterfly exist today. There is still the social media page. So I have my Instagram page, and now I have this podcast. And the podcast feels extremely authentic. It feels extremely valuable. And it feels like I'm adding value, not just taking up space on a platform. In preparation for this episode, I wanted to go back to my 3 tenets of why I started the podcast. This is great for people who may have not been following TSB podcast from the very start. And so really why I started the podcast was to do 3 things. Number 1, I wanted to have honest discussion. So much of my life in the, like I like to call them, the before sober times, aka active addiction, was shrouded in lies, secrecy, and shame. And so there's a really great quote that I love by Brene Brown. And she says, shame loves secrecy. The most dangerous thing to do after a shaming experience is to hide or bury our story. When we bury our story, the shame metastasizes like cancer. And so I use the platform to have real talk, real discussion about addiction, recovery, trauma, relationships, joy, and pain. And I think the best part of doing that is obviously sharing my personal truth. So it's almost serving as like the first phase of the social media page when I started it as a personal blog. But it also integrates other people. So like we're still looking at community. I'm well connected with other sober people in the community that want to share their stories of resilience and their stories of pain. And I think it helps keep me grounded in my mission around why I do this work. The second reason why I started the podcast was to change the way people view sobriety. I've decidedly given up on trying to convince people of the ills of alcohol. It sucks. If you don't believe me, whatever, big alcohol, I guess you've won for now. But I think a better use of my time has always been showing people through my actions and through my lifestyle how incredibly transformative sobriety is from the inside out. Now, here's the difference from like me in the beginning phases of my sobriety when I started the Sober Butterfly social media account and today. I don't want to gloss over the hard parts, okay? It is transformative, but it requires a lot of effort, okay? If it were easy, more people would be sober and stay sober. Is it the solution to all life's problems? Absolutely not. But it's a great place to start when you are drinking too much or drinking yourself to an early grave, which is truly what I believe I was doing. I also want to recognize that people have different reasons and purposes for being sober. For some people, it is a matter of life and death, which is connected to this idea that like popularizing sobriety can be dangerous when, it's seen as this trend and it's like cute for now, maybe not for later. I am a lifer, okay? I never plan on drinking again. I need sobriety like my life depends on it. And I live my life that way to always prioritize my sobriety because I don't want to imagine what my life would be like. I can't imagine actually what my life would be like. I lived it for so long when I was drinking too much and making terrible decisions time and time again because I didn't truly love myself. So I want to be clear that like for me, it's not just a cute little phase. It's not like something that I plan on maybe outgrowing when the time suits me. It is something that I plan on doing for the rest of my life, and it requires much from me, but it is well worth it. The last reason I started this podcast was to inspire people. So, they say the opposite of addiction is connection. I don't know if that's entirely true, but I definitely think that connecting to other people's stories when you thought that you were the only piece of garbage left in the trash heap. I know it's a really extreme example, but that's kind of how I used to feel. It can be actually life altering when you connect with other people. So I definitely think that in inspiring people through this podcast or through my Instagram page, it's a beautiful thing. And inspiring people doesn't always have to be this like really serious thing, because I think that I like to inject a lot of laughter, humor, silliness into my account. I just wanted to share that to remind myself and remind others why I started this podcast. And I hope that I'm always keeping in mind my mission from the beginning and seeing it through, because it still holds true for me today, 16 episodes in. For the last part of this week's episode, I want to share what some of the comments read from that same post. So remember the post with the Spirit Halloween bag and me repurposing that to be a sober influencer and what that meant. So let me just quickly share some of the comments that you guys said, because you said some really prolific things that I think are worth sharing. I said in my caption for this post that, look, my page is trendy, but I still take my sobriety seriously. So that was sort of like the overarching theme of this post. And so people really shared beautiful things. And I will share the good. There was no real bad, but like I'll share controversial things as well. So Reagan_Riley90, and Reagan was on episode, I believe, 105 of the Sober Butterfly podcast. Strippers Are Sober too. Absolutely love her to pieces. And she said that, I think your page is wonderful. What you shared here sounds very clear. You take your sobriety seriously, and you also like to have fun with the things you share. You are 100. I love you, Reagan. Thank you so much for tuning in and uplifting me, because I was definitely in my feels when I posted this. Boozy Blonde No More said, people have to dig deep in all the wrong ways to feel angry or triggered by individuals celebrating and encouraging sobriety. You and your page are perfect as is. Star. Thank you, Boo. I appreciate you. I responded to her and I said, one of my core values is always celebrating and encouraging sobriety. If that triggers or bothers some folk, then they can kindly unfollow me. LOL, but not LOL, seriously. Unfollow me if that bothers you. I had Caminandro Ciago, apologize if I'm messing up your handle, said that I can see both sides. I think it's similar to sponsors or someone leading others in sobriety should have more time under their belt. However, if being a sober influencer keeps you sober and helps others, where's the issue? So I like that you mentioned the sponsor aspect of this. I think that was a good anecdote. So sponsors are people in AA who help other people. Like you're almost like a model in helping other people through the 12 steps. Sponsees or newly sober people or new people in the program, AA, get sober and stay sober and hold them accountable. So I think that's a good point, because if you're looking for a sponsor in AA, you typically would pick someone 9 times out of 10 or 10 times out of 10 that has more sober time than you, not someone that has less. So I totally understand that perspective, and I thought that was a good anecdote or connection. But I do want to mention, and I did say this in my response to you, that I think sometimes like the further away you are from early sobriety, so the more time you have under your belt, sometimes the further removed you are from what it's actually like to be a newly sober person. So I just wanted to highlight that, because I do agree with you with the sponsor example, but I also think that sometimes you can learn from people who are teetering on the same line as you or going through the same things as you at the same time. And then I'll share one more. So Sober Diaries 2022 said, great topic. I have a whopping 83 days sober. Congrats, babe. And I figure if there's someone who has 0 days or 82 days and is following my journey and is inspired, that's awesome. I've also found that my early sobriety experience is different from those in the rooms with 20 plus years. Being in Alcoholics Anonymous years ago was, dare I say, shameful. Now, I proudly tell people that I am managing my disease in all the ways I can, including keeping myself accountable on Instagram and going to meetings. I am so glad that being sober is trendy and we can pound recover out loud instead of in secret. Wow, if that doesn't connect to my second sober mission for this podcast, I don't know what else does. You encapsulated everything I was mentioning earlier, which is this idea that like we should not be ashamed of our sobriety. And I think the shame is where the disease lies, or where the addiction and drinking, at least for myself, lived. And I don't want to recover in secrecy. And that's the only critique I would say. It's not even really a critique. I get the anonymity factor with AA. Look at me, I said that word right for once. The anonymity factor, I get that in AA because, not everyone wants to have their sobriety be under a spotlight. And that's everyone's right to decide if they want to share with others. We also share a lot of deep personal truths in meetings, so I get that. And like, you're never to repeat what you hear outside of a meeting to anyone ever, so that's like a big tenet of the program, which I appreciate. But in saying so, if you're forced to secrecy, then I think it can sometimes bleed into other aspects of your life. So I respect that you put that out there. So thank you so much for sharing. And I agree with those sentiments. And I do a combination of, obviously recovering out loud with this podcast and with my sober Instagram page, but also I still attend meetings and I do respect the laws of AA. They're not really laws, but like the core values of AA, and keeping the anonymity factor and not ever sharing what I hear in meetings or who said what or who goes to where. Actually, okay, there was like a lot of comments. There was just one more that I wanted to highlight. So this one was from Or Health, OAR, or I believe Health. And they stated, we believe it doesn't have to be binary. For some, this is life and death, but that doesn't take away from the important message of inspiration that can open doors for those with mild to moderate alcohol use disorder, or AUD, binge drinkers, or those who are simply curious about the lifestyle. And I think that is exactly where I stand. It does not have to be binary. It is not black and white. I think we can all learn from each other. And by promoting sobriety and normalizing it as a mainstream culture, instead of like this other or this like shameful thing that should live on the fringes of society, we are making it so that everyone, no matter where they fall on the alcohol use disorder spectrum, have an opportunity to be normal in society, even if they have struggled with alcohol in the past. So just to wrap up the theme of Halloween, I'm not playing dress up. I'm not pretending to be a sober person. I will be the first to admit that my page is trendy. It is curated. I put a lot of time and energy into making it that way. And I think that's just my personality. I think that I'm a pretty person and I like my things to look pretty, but I need to look more under the hood, and I want to make sure that I'm always talking about not just the beautiful parts of recovery, but also the difficult parts. I have not relapsed. I would be the first to admit if I had, but there are other things that I suffer from that I do talk about in the podcast, like seasonal depression, like disordered eating, but I could do more. This is what I love about this platform too. I can be real with y'all, have real talk, right? And so I'm going to be doing more to make sure that I'm not just curating. I want to be sure that I'm always sharing the full dynamics of recovery, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Okay, that's all I got for you this week. Thank you so much for watching or listening to the Sober Butterfly podcast. Please weigh in. What did you think about this episode? Do you agree that sobriety is trendy right now? And if so, is that problematic? I'd love to hear from you. Just a quick reminder that new episodes of TSB Podcast drop every single Tuesday, so be sure to hit that follow or subscribe button so that you can stay up to date with all TSB Podcast news. Also, I would love if you guys left a quick review for this podcast. It really helps my platform grow so that others can also discover all the wonderful joys of this podcast. And I love you guys. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Bye.